Hey everyone, so today I want to talk about Tim Burton's latest film, Frankenweenie, and just briefly before I get in with the actual film itself, if you notice the date of this video, you will know that today is actually the release date of Frankenweenie, and I actually made the time to go and see it in the middle of the day because I had to see it as soon as possible. 2 weeks ago I bought the Frankenweenie purse. I've been looking forward to this for the longest time. Let's go and find out if it was worth the wait. Okay, so the plot of this is fantastic and not all that surprising. Victor loves science, and when his pet dog Sparky passes away, he manages to bring him back to life, which at first seems really great, but when the kids from school find out about that, things start to get a little bit out of hand and a little bit crazy. Needless to say, this does follow a lot of the structure and formation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Of course, that's where the idea for this film came from. And before anybody asks me, no, I have not seen Tim Burton's original Frankenweenie, so I cannot do a comparison, but eventually I hope to do see it. Now, being a huge fan of Frankenstein, the story of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster, and I love Mary Shelley, she's from the literary period that my heart lies within. I was really looking forward to this, not just because I was a Tim Burton fan, but obviously I'm a huge fan of the Tim Burton household, that I was going to go and see it regardless. But I did worry that there was going to be elements about it which weren't necessarily going to be child friendly. But I can say right now, before I go any further, I do think it's handled very, very well. There are one or two moments where I kind of thought, really, is that, there's a particular scene where Victor is screwing a bolt. Well, he's screwing a bolt. I'm not going to say any more. And what he's screwing into is a little bit weird. But because you can only see a zoomed up version of it and not the big picture, I thought it was a very clever way of representing it. And there are loads of little moments throughout where I think, is he really going to do this in a family-friendly film? But the way it's presented is brilliant. So I think the fact that Tim Burton has taken this really, really complex story that is quite dark and quite heavy for a family film, and made it watchable and translated it for younger audiences to be able to enjoy as well. So I think that's handled very well and in a lot more ways than I could have imagined. So I'm very pleased with that. Obviously, the directing is absolutely fantastic, just across the board, not even just on the scenes where it's a little bit weird. Of course, the whole thing is pretty weird, but it's Tim Burton. The directing is top notch, and I would personally say, from all the Tim Burton films I've seen, one of his finest. His animations, I think, are always quite cleverly done. But this is my favourite Tim Burton animation now. I don't know if I'd say it's my favourite Tim Burton film, but I definitely love the animation side of it. And there are certain moments where you're thinking, how has he done that? You don't feel like you're watching an animation film sometimes, which is the magic of it, because it just feels so real, despite the fact that the characters are quite peculiar looking most of the time. Also, he has managed to revamp this in quite an interesting way without wanting to spoil too much of it. This really doesn't affect the plot. At the beginning, the family are sitting down watching a 3D film. I thought that was a really genius way just to say, hello, yes, I'm bringing this back, but look what I've done. It's not the same film, and we're making it a bit more modern, and we're making it adaptable for a modern audience. I just thought that was a really clever way to say at the very beginning of the film, hello, we're in the 21st century now, and I really, really made me quite happy. The one thing that didn't make me happy was the amount of times I cried. I cried at the beginning, I cried in the middle, I cried at the end. I normally try to hold back in a cinema when I'm upset, but it was impossible. I had to cry. I cried a lot. My makeup was down my face. It was catastrophic, but it's really, really, really lovely to be able to cry at a film like that and then be happy when I leave, because I'm just buzzing at how magical the film itself was and how beautifully presented it was. So, yes, do expect to cry, but it's for all the right reasons. It really is. Cast is top notch. Three people I want to mention in particular. Catherine O'Hara played the voice of the weird girl, and also the mother and a couple of other characters. The weird girl as a character I thought was really quite fascinating, and she could have a film of her own. This character, I personally feel, could become kind of like her own little franchise. She's really quite a weird character and very fascinating. Atticus Shaffer voiced Igor. I was so excited about that when I read the cast list before I went to see it. I was like, yes, I love him. And Igor is one of my favourite gothic characters as well. And Conchata Farrell voices Bob's mother, which I didn't know until I went to see it, and so that was a lovely surprise. I do want your help though. On IMDb months ago, it said Billy Burton was voiced in it. Billy Burton, obviously Helena and Tim's son. But he's not on that list now. He's gone from that list. Does anybody know if he was, perhaps originally planned to be in it and then kind of wasn't? It just baffled me a little bit. I was looking forward to that, but never mind. But yeah, the cast is brilliant. I have absolutely no complaints. Winona Ryder voices in it. It's sensational. It does get slightly weird towards the end. It bridges the gap towards the end between the Gothic and the science element of it and the scientific side of it, where it kind of goes away from the Gothic and goes quite electric. And then it brings the two back together again, which is great. It doesn't follow Shelley's story exactly. There's also a very obvious reference to Shelley in this, to Mary Shelley, which I hadn't expected, and that made me really happy as well. I adore Mary Shelley. I think she's fantastic. So the fact that Burton is making it blatantly obvious, but only if you're aware of who wrote the story. You know, it doesn't say, and this is by Mary Shelley. But if you're aware that this is based on Frankenstein, it's a really nice little thing to have in there. Even though the character that represents Shelley is, you know, quite questionable, but it's very lovely. The film is bonkers. It's absolutely mental, but it's so cleverly done. There are a lot of morals in there. There are a lot of messages in there. I think more than any other Burton film I've seen, a lot for children to take away, but also in little bite-sized chunks. It's kind of like a watered-down version of the Frankenstein story. There's a windmill in there, which I hadn't expected. That won't make any sense unless you're familiar with other representations of Frankenstein, but that was brilliant. Cast, brilliant. Script, great. Danny Elfman music, of course, fantastic. The transition between the Gothic music and the kind of more harmonic, soul-touching music is really, really well done as well. Directing, perfect. One of the best Tim Burton films ever. I encourage everybody to go and see it. Please feel free to leave comments and let me know your thoughts on this, and I will see you all next time. Bye!